Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the AgView Pitch. We are heading into a new marketing week, and we're lucky enough to have with us today Chad Hart from Iowa State University. How's it going, Chad?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Well, I think I'm doing pretty good. I was drying corn, but I was just informed that my dryer shut off. And so that's kind of always how it works, right when you're trying to do three things at once, only one of those things is probably going to work right, correct?
Well, possibly, but Amy, maybe this is just a sign it didn't need dried.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It is interesting as we record this, on the going into the week of the 23rd of September. It's amazing how dry a lot of the corn is already. We're in a 99-day hybrid right now, and it's in that 22% range. And we'll take it. The yields are phenomenal, above APH, it looks like. I mean, we're not done with the field, and not that I don't trust yield monitors, but I like scales much better. And so we'll reserve what the yield is until we find out what the scales actually say. But with that said, what are you hearing on early harvest with the guys you work with? You hearing much information?
Well, that's the deal. It's early, but yeah, what I've been hearing is really good yields. Moistures are lower than people anticipated, but it does make sense given that we've had these drier conditions, especially through August and here in early September.
Yeah. What about on soybeans? Anything specific there? I know there were some guys running a little earlier on some soybeans. Anything you're hearing there
Yep.
specifically?
Again, it comes back to this idea of things are drier than anticipated. I've
Mm.
had a few folks tell me, if you will, they've been getting too dry.
Yeah.
And so needing to, in certain sense, delay the harvest a bit. So they'll get out there in the morning, capture the beans early when they've got, a couple more points of moisture to play with, and then having to pull back out for fear of shatter. So
Mm.
I think that's something we didn't expect to be worried about now, given what we went through the earlier this spring, but it's kind of went from a wet year to a dry year here at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's with the heat we had and everything, it just really has accelerated stuff for sure. Um, with that said, that this harvest pace is going to really pick up here in the next couple of weeks. I think one of the things I want you to touch on is just kind of what some things guys need to be thinking about as they manage basis and specifically those bushels that are maybe unsold that are those extra bushels that you don't have a home for. Any thoughts there? Because I think obviously there's probably some bushels out there that are yet unpriced and there's not a home for them.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us because, we've been watching on the future side of the equation, prices got up north of 4 for corn, north of 10 for beans as we're looking at those harvest delivery dates, but they're not really moving very far away from that. And
Hmm.
we've also seen that basis for the most part, as we looked at deferred contracts, is still weakening as we look out there. So it's more of a matter of I tell folks it depends on when we're pricing, we need to keep separate, the idea of setting futures versus setting basis. And you want to try to maximize each of those pieces. And it may be what you want to do is you're sitting here going, okay, can I lock in a better basis today, put it under a basis contract and leave that futures open for a bit in order to try to gain a little bit there? Or am I going to play a longer game here and go, okay, I don't have a home for it now. Um, I may have to lock in a basis that I'm not comfortable with, but do I have an opportunity to maybe re-own on paper and try to make a gain there as opposed to in the basis play?
Hmm. Yeah. What about on the other side of the equation? When you look, there's pretty good carry out there. So those who know those bushels are, they're going to be able to hang on to them. They're not going to sell everything. Do you think it's going to make sense here in the near term, or if we see some kind of price strength, excuse me, price strength during the month of October that is gives us some opportunity, I guess, for lack of a better term, should we maybe be thinking about pricing some of that March or May corn, maybe that May corn for delivery during, and do an HTA instead of, you're talking about a basis
Mhm.
contract, but maybe do an HTA, set yourself up for a better basis in that,
Right.
April timeframe type of deal.
Well, that's the deal. Yeah, if I know I have the room to hold it, and as you say, carry is good. And so looking at that, well, I guess last time I looked, I didn't calculate it today, but I think we were looking at what Dees to Mart or Dees to May corn was 40 cents. I think on the bean side, Nove to March was about 35 last time I looked. So you did have some decent carry out there. And so, yeah, I would definitely be looking at either a hedge or hedge to arrive, giving myself that pricing opportunity now, locking in a floor underneath futures and looking for that basis improvement as we go into next spring. Because I think we will see some improvement not only on the basis side, but I'm also looking for the possibility of, okay, I think we'll have a chance to maybe escalate that hedge on the futures as we move through the springtime.
Hmm.
If we get what I'm thinking we will get, which in this case is we have seen demand remain fairly firm across the board. In fact, as USDA updated their numbers this month, they raised exports a little bit. They raised ethanol a little bit. We continue to see strong feed demand out there. And I think that bodes well for us as we're headed into next spring, that if I could see the possibility of in October, USDA comes in with maybe a little bit smaller crop and a little bit bigger demand, that helps put a reason for some stronger prices going into next spring.
Hmm. Yeah, if as we watch demand and that kind of thing, talk about what kind of price opportunities can people be looking for if they are looking at maybe pricing that carry? Is there any kind of range that you would be looking for, or any thoughts there on corn
Well,
beans for that
I'll
matter?
put it this way. I'll give a relative range. As I'm looking right now, I'm sitting here going over the past 9 months, we've watched prices slide roughly a dollar 20 on the corn market.
Hmm.
I'm looking to gain back maybe half of that as we move into next spring.
Hmm.
So it's not that we're going to magically go back up to where we were at the beginning of this calendar year. But I
Right.
think we could gain back 50, 60 cents here if, and in this case, there's some data coming out. I noticed actually some of the chatter today around the markets were that we are expecting smaller crops elsewhere around the world, and that is going to help lower global ending stocks, which should help allow for some upward price movement
Hmm.
deeper in the marketing year.
Gotcha. Um, what about soybeans? Any kind of thoughts there?
Soybeans a little tougher, mainly just because, we know we're staring at probably the biggest crop we've ever had by far. We're also looking at Brazil, despite the problems down there, getting some rainfall now. And early projections had them growing 8% more beans, I think, than they did the year before. And so we don't have that same storyline about shrinking stocks possibly globally.
Hmm.
So the carries there, I think the market is hopeful you could see the same pattern that, if you will, corn and wheat help lead soybeans higher this spring. But I think
I lost you
it
there.
opens up other markets for us to fill
I
in.
I lost you there when you said go back to where you said when corn and wheat starts going higher and take it from there.
Okay.
My
Yep.
internet.
So I got frozen.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So like I say, in this case, I'm looking at soybeans. I think I'm looking at a possibility, maybe corn and wheat helping pull soybeans higher, just because with soybeans, we don't have that positive, or we don't have a good potential of that positive stock story because of global supplies being so large.
Hmm.
But I think we could see, if we do see increased demand, especially coming out of China, where China may not buy directly from us, they may go to Brazil, but that means Brazil is not selling into other markets, which will open up for us.
Hmm.
And so I think there's that same sort of possibility. It's smaller on the soybean side than it is for corn.
Yeah. What as far as just thinking about the funds and their position, they played this game really good this year, really smart. What do you see the funds doing to impact the farmer? Is there anything that we need to be aware of? We need to be watching them do, us do, any correlations there, or anything we need to be paying attention to on the farm?
Well, we definitely want to pay attention to them again because, as you say, they played the game really well this year. They moved in strong when they were worried about, if you will, how big this crop could get.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've seen them pull back a bit to create a more balanced situation from coming out of them. And so I'm going to be watching them to see, if you will, where they're betting we come out when it comes to the demand side of the market. Do we see them going more long as we move through the fall and early winter here? Because if they're moving that way, that tells you they're seeing signals that that export market may be heating up for us. And so I think we can get some additional signal by watching what the funds are up to.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Last question. We'll keep this one kind of short because I probably need to go see why my dryer shut off here. But
Yep.
I guess what I want to ask here lastly is long term. Okay, let's think out all the way maybe to the end of 2025. We've got, we're sitting here pretty dang long on 25 crop. We're extremely long, obviously, on the 25 crop, which is okay. But we just, as we record this last week, we just saw an interest rate decline. Um, inflation is, arguably slowed down, but there's still an increase in inflation. I don't care what anybody says. We're seeing it especially on the farm side of the equation with what things are costing and all that. Talk a little bit about anything that we should be watching as it relates to interest rates, inflation, the stock market, some of these outside markets, energies. Is there anything that is like this could be a hurdle or this could be an opportunity as we look just a little bit longer term and also think about marketing the 2025 crop? Kind of a
Sure.
big picture deal.
Yep, big picture deal. I think for 2025, as you mentioned, it's okay to be really long right now. I mean, yeah, we should be. And typically I tell farmers you want to be thinking, okay, what are the moves maybe I want to take next spring? Because seasonally you would figure again, we like to look at that April, May, June period. Why? Because that's when we seasonally see the best prices we can obtain. So look to set some price protection at that period of time. But as we look out there, you mentioned, the Fed, made a fairly dramatic move on interest rates this week. And I think that indicates some warning signs are flashing now that, yeah, we need to worry about our job growth out there and that they're trying to promote that now. And so inflation is still here, but it's taking a back seat right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that the Fed is making the move to make sure that they're trying to keep the U.S. economy growing as we look out there.
Right.
And I would say not only do we want to keep the U.S. economy growing, but if we can keep that going, that hopefully means that the global economy continues to grow as well. Because when I'm talking about that export demand growth that we're looking for, that's much more likely to happen if you've got growing economies as opposed to economies in recession.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, this is something we definitely need to watch. And, we'll get a few key indicators there. We're seeing what the Fed's doing with the interest rate. But you mentioned energy. That's an area I'm going to watch closely. Do we continue to see, let's call it the slow climb up of crude oil? Do we see that with natural gas? Because usually that's going to bode well for showing, again, growing economies worldwide, which translates into growing consumption for U.S. products worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of outside stuff to pay attention to on this 25 thing. Last question. Are you comfortable with anybody making some small sales for the 25 in this price range, or do you think a person just sit tight on corn, soybeans, and wheat? I mean, there's kind of the three sisters there. Is there any thoughts on the new crop that, you know, maybe a person should be thinking about? Not advice, but just things to pay attention to.
Well, I'd say it never hurts to look. And, especially at this time of year, I tell folks, if you're just wanting to establish a toehold in the market right now, and hopefully we'll build to better pricing as we move forward, then no, I mean, it's a good time to put in that toehold right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're comfortable with that price that you see out there. As we're looking at Dees 25 corn, I got to admit, I haven't looked at that price lately, but let's pull it up.
it's been in the 450 range, which
Yeah,
a lot of our clients, it's kind of not a great price, but for maybe half of our clients, it's going to cover their expenses, and
yeah.
pay themselves too, their overhead cost as well,
And
assuming
so,
age yield.
yep, I could see making a small move there. I always like to tell folks, you make this move today, and what you hope is it's
Yeah.
the worst sale you
Right.
made.
Right.
But at least even at that level, if it's making money for you, it's a good sale.
Hmm.
And it gets you thinking about those opportunities over the course of time.
Hmm.
Because while we oftentimes rely on the seasonal pattern to tell us when those higher prices will be, they're not always accurate. It's not always, life doesn't play that way. So anytime we can make a profitable sale, it is a good time to make that sale, no matter when it falls on the calendar.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like that's the case all the time. Is you get say you just use that 450 as an example on D's corn. If it goes up to 470, if a person didn't make that sale at 450, it gets to 470, you probably don't make a big enough sale there. Maybe you should be pulling the trigger on 15 or so percent, and if you didn't pull the trigger on any at that lower point, you start out with a 5% sale, and you're kind of always could get behind depending on, what the price movement is, from moving forward from there. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the big things that we found over with marketing studies over the past 50 years is that people do better with smaller but more frequent sales
incremental.
because
Yeah.
then we're not trying to hit that home run, but what we're doing is we're building in, and typically we're building in a really good price average over time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so if I can start above break even, that's a great place to start.
Yeah. And that doesn't, it's not what any one sale is. It's the average, right? It's always the
Yes.
average. That's what counts. That's what pays the bills, and and what the reality is.
Yep. Well, that's the deal. It's the average that grows the farm.
Exactly. All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time today. If you're all right with it, I want to try to get you back as we get towards the, latter part of harvest and that middle to third way through harvest, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing and what the impact is, and we'll talk a little bit about the cash market and kind of see where basis is and have some more discussion at that point if that's good for you.
Yep. I'd be glad to do that.
That'd
Plus,
be
you can give
awesome.
me the update on the dryer.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be running way before that. So, all right. Well, hey, and also to everybody else, Alyssa would be frustrated with me if I didn't mention this. Make sure you guys, if you're not signed up yet for the AgView Executive Business Conference, January 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. If you're not signed up, check that out on our website, agviewsolutions.com. Get signed up. It's a little over three-quarters full, I think, at this point now. So if you are going to go, get signed up soon. With that said, thanks everybody. We will catch you again next time on the AgView Pitch.